What's up, dudes? MightyBear here, and today we're here to talk about one of my favorite fighting games of all time, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Now, this game has had a huge impact on
Wretched being, what are you doing?
Goku Black. I'm trying to make a show here. It's about fighting games, and it's never been done before by anyone ever. Not anyone else has ever attempted to make a show or talk about fighting games on YouTube. No, I am the very first one to do this.
Right, okay, whatever you say, mortal.
Maybe I shouldn't start with Marvel 3.
Why? Because someone a lot better than you did this idea already?
No, I just want to talk about a game that people are actually actively talking about right now. That's all.
Yes, you keep telling yourself that.
I need to play something modern, something exciting, something that people really enjoy.
You mean everything your pathetic channel isn't?
Black, I really don't appreciate your negativity, okay? Just because you're evil doesn't mean you have to be an asshole. And I just like fighting games. Fighting games are something that I personally really enjoy, and I want to share that with everyone. I think fighting games are some of the most intimate, most rewarding games you can possibly play. And if I can make more fans of fighting games, then that would be amazing.
Oh, you mean like that other mortal, Maximilian?
Yes, kind of like Max, okay? I know this has kind of been done before, okay? And honestly, I don't know how exactly I'm going to stand out from the crowd, but I just feel like there isn't a lot of content focused on fighting games. And just because someone like Maximilian or someone else has done it before, doesn't mean that I've done it before. I at least have to try, right?
Whatever you say, Black Max.
I think I'll save Marvel 3 for another day. But what should I start with then? Maybe something with really deep battle mechanics and a large cast of characters that all play completely different from each other with unique moveset and abilities. And
take this!
Street Fighter 5? This game is as boring as oatmeal, and not even the good kind. Why would I start with this game?
Because if you don't, I'll execute the Zero Mortal plan.
So, Street Fighter V is one of the most interesting games in the series. Now, I could start talking about the history of the series dating all the way back to Street Fighter 1, but come on, did anyone play Street Fighter 1? So let's start back with Street Fighter 3. Even though Street Fighter 2 had major success with being the best-selling fighting game of all time, up until being dethroned recently by Smash Ultimate.
Well, that can't be right. Smash isn't a fighting game.
Stupid fighting game debate aside, Street Fighter 2 was a cultural icon and recognizable and heavily referenced in pop culture.
Me, you, your mom, your grandmother, your dad who was too embarrassed of you and left you when you were 2 years old. Basically everyone's played Street Fighter 2.
Street Fighter 3 was not. It's hard to think about now, but Street Fighter 3 wasn't very popular, and frankly, it isn't very popular with mainstream media. If you see a movie or a show reference Street Fighter, 99% of the time it's in reference to Street Fighter 2. Why is that? Because they didn't have Chun-Li. Think about it, the first two iterations of Street Fighter 3 didn't have Chun-Li, so no one played them. But as soon as they added her back in,
boom, instant classic.
The thing people liked most about Street Fighter 2 were the characters, and most of them were gone from the original cast. So only Ryu and Ken remained. Instead of Blanca or Dhalsim, we got Necro. Instead of Dan and Sakura, we got Sean.
Actually, I do like Sean. A Black Shoto character, he looks pretty clean, I'm not gonna lie.
While some of these characters would become fan favorites, none of them are as iconic as the previous casts, taking Street Fighter out of the mainstream for a bit. So after years of waiting, fans finally got the long-awaited sequel in the Street Fighter series that changed the fighting game landscape as we know it. Yes, of course, I am talking about Street Fighter EX3. Oh, and then there's Street Fighter 4, I guess. Street Fighter, after about a decade of no releases in the main series, was finally getting a numbered entry, and Capcom made sure not to make the same mistake twice, adding all the World Warriors from Street Fighter 2 with only a handful of alpha characters as well as some brand new ones. It was clear that the focus of the game's roster was that the characters most people recognized, being from Street Fighter 2, were back, and while I'll save my opinions on the game itself for another video, you're safe this time, El Forte. My point is simply that Street Fighter at this point was trying to appeal to a wider audience, but there was one thing that seemingly kept even more people from buying the game and continuing to play: accessibility. No! With Street Fighter V, Capcom, and stop me if you've heard this before, wanted to make the game accessible to newer players by simplifying the mechanics of the game while also making the game more visually exciting. Since Street Fighter 4 was such a neutral heavy game, it wasn't uncommon to just have matches of people just poking each other out. Since for casual players watching a high level match of Street Fighter 4, it may have seemed boring and may have turned off potential new players to try the game. Street Fighter V would be made to be an action-packed game with a heavy emphasis on rushdown and flashy combos. Sounds good in theory maybe, but how did this translate to the actual game? Well,
I do think that the guy who made Street Fighter V is a genius. For somebody to come up with, say if I was the developer, whoever it is, whoever had the idea to design this game, okay, to be shitty like this.
Now, it's like, your neutral game doesn't really matter.
Because I think the game kind of designed itself into a corner.
You know, I don't really care about any of that stuff. I just need these throw loops took out. I need Balrog to stop touching me one time, killing me.
No matter the amount of work that the player put in, it's immediately negated by a 50-50 situation. And I know that there was 50-50s in other Street Fighters as well, but this game, for some reason, everybody can agree that it's the most cancerous in this game.
yeah, Street Fighter V launched to a pretty lukewarm reception from casual players. Casual players looking for single-player offerings really didn't have anything to do but grind out colors and challenge mode, which, oh my god, does anyone remember challenge mode? Capcom really thought people would want to play boring-ass CPUs for 50 games straight, only to get to the end and actually fight a cheap CPU, lose, and then have to do it all over again, just for some stupid colors? I still get flashbacks. But that doesn't even say anything about the actual game itself. I don't really think how Street Fighter V balance used to be is really important more than how the game was and still is being played even now. And Street Fighter V had a huge problem of just being flat out boring to some players. Which is weird because Capcom did their best to try to make the game a lot faster and more offensive. So no more beating around the bush. How does the game actually play? Well, let me tell you, Street Fighter V is the most aggressively okay fighting game out there. Yeah, honestly, one of the biggest problems with Street Fighter V is just how average it can feel at times. The changes made to the mechanics from Street Fighter 4 are sort of counterintuitive to the idea of making the game more accessible. What exactly do I mean? Well, let's start with this game's main mechanic, the V system, consisting of V skills, V reversals, and most importantly, V triggers. V skills are honestly kind of just another move a character can do with medium punch and medium kick, with the benefit of a meter gain for the V gauge. These moves have a wide variety of applications depending on the character, and since Arcade Edition, everyone has 2 of them. These can range from simply having another move like Laura's or Cammy's to V skills that alter existing moves like Alex or Urien. Which, speaking of which, can someone tell me how to properly pronounce his name? Is it Urien? Is it Urine? Is it Urine? Like, what is it? But yeah, V skills don't really add a lot to the game, and very few characters have really good V skills that define their character, and most of the time it's just used to extend combos or for a utility purpose. Next is V reversal, and why do I feel like this mechanic doesn't work correctly? Basically, it's an alpha counter or a defensive option characters have to stop pressure, but the problem with them is that some of the best pressure in the game is caused by jabs and baiting throws, which I'll talk a lot more about later, but V reversals are completely stuffed by grabs and even command grabs, which are more of a commitment than regular throws. But regardless, I just think that V reversals should let you get out of all those situations to give the game a better defensive option, which we will also get to. But now, lastly, let's talk about V trigger, and oh boy, did they outdo themselves with this one. Imagine a fighting game with an automatic win button. That's basically V-triggers. Okay, not really, but honestly, it's pretty close. Imagine you completely dominating in a round and you get clipped once, taking a full combo. Okay, no big deal. All you have to do is block whatever mix-up they're trying to do, and you guessed wrong. And since you were beating on them the whole time, they have V-trigger and they go for a full V-trigger combo, meaning you're now one hit away from getting stunned. Okay, this is bad, but still in your favor. All you have to do is block and you get grabbed. Now you're stunned, your opponent gets a full combo, and you lose the round. The V system really only promotes an offensive style of play, but to give it praise, it does succeed at looking really cool with some characters. For example, Urine's V-Trigger 1 gives him the almighty Aegis Reflector, a wall that lasts 3 hits, and while that's less than Street Fighter 3's, it still has a ton of possibilities for setups. You can see this with probably one of, if not the best Urine player, Nemo, who has some of the sickest setups with the Reflector.
He's alive with the mate. He's alive. Oh no, we got Shenanigans.
Here we go, here we go.
It's time to guess. Oh, we
Stop it, Nemo, please.
Ow!
There are children watching.
Hold on in. Oh! Oh! Ow!
Well, even if the V system is heavily offensive, surely Capcom added some other defensive options to balance the game out, right? Well, no, they didn't. See, even with the addition of the second V skills and V triggers, they didn't add much variety to the game. This is probably Street Fighter V's biggest complaint, that its casts are made to be played in a specific way, so it makes the game feel rigid by design. And this all ties all the way back to the 8th deadly sin, accessibility. By giving characters less options and streamlining the mechanics to make them simple, what you get are characters that only have one playstyle. This was different back in Street Fighter 4, for example, where a character like Balrog had more than one playstyle to him, even if you were playing him with the same Ultra. Balrog can play a really offensive game, going through challenges with his pressure, with his EX moves that have armor it can hit either overhead or low. Or you can stay mid-screen and kill your opponent slowly with pokes or frustrate them into doing something that's unsafe and punishing them accordingly. Or you could be the best Balrog player of all time and do both like PR Balrog. Now compare that to Street Fighter V Balrog, where he's naturally a much more offensive character. With the headbutt being an invincible reversal option before, now it's his V reversal, which I said before can be easily baited by throws. Or even worse, you could face every Street Fighter V player's greatest fear, footsies. Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry. I meant, crush counter. There we go, yes. Yet another huge offensive mechanic, and honestly probably the biggest one. See, the other biggest complaint about Street Fighter V is the consistent mix-ups, or specifically 50-50s. These are situations that make you guess one of two options. To give an example, our Mika is a character that strives on 50-50 mix-ups. She has a command grab that can be avoided by jumping, but she can also go for a tech throw or fish for a crush counter. So if you jump, not only will you be hit, but most likely be put in the same situation again if you guess wrong. Now these kinds of situations did happen in other Street Fighter games, mainly in Street Fighter 4. Going back to Street Fighter 3, you can actually interrupt the startup frames of a throw with jabs, but in Street Fighter 4, jabs can be eaten by throws. Now there are some major differences between these situations in Street Fighter 4 than in Street Fighter 5. And this is really the crux of why so many players think its gameplay becomes stale. In Street Fighter 4, let's say the opponent is knocked down. There are multiple options you have, from going for throw, jab pressure. For some characters it may be an overhead or a low or even a cross-up. All of them are valid options that you can mess around and play with. There are some characters that have specific setups that you can use and are unique to that character. Now compare that to Street Fighter 5, where when you get a hard knockdown, well, congratulations, I hope you like fruit smoothies, because you are now stuck in the blender. And you know what happens in the blender. This is where everything from before ties together, to the weak V reversals, the high damaging V trigger and crush counter combos, all come together to create a meta that revolves around knockdowns and 50-50s. Why go for a cross up or some specific setup when you could just throw out the crush counter button. Worst case scenario, they block it and you're plus, so they can't punish you for it. It could just land, and depending on the character, you could get a full combo, or be put back in the same situation. Or if you're the opponent and you dare to push a button or tech a throw, you may get smacked with a crush counter. Again, to compare to Street Fighter 4, where even though you can't jab your way out of grabs like Street Fighter 3, if you did guess wrong most of the time, the damage you take isn't a lot. But in Street Fighter 5...
Hello, operator? Hi, yes, hello. I think I was robbed. Okay, where did it happen? In Street Fighter 5. Okay, please hold. This is the 8th call today. The Street Fighter 5 bandit has struck again!
This makes invincible reversals way too risky, since it could pretty much cost you the game if they block it.
I know so far it sounds like I've been really hard on Street Fighter 5.
No, it sounds like you're just bad at the game, like all mortals are.
I can admit, I'm not the best player in the world, but I don't have to be just to make observations and analyze a game. I don't want to come off like I'm complaining or anything, but these are things that I feel like are legitimate flaws within the game's design.
Even then, honestly, despite all of that, I still really enjoy Street Fighter 5. Since the Arcade Edition update, the presentation has greatly improved. I do like the idea of each fight being presented as a big stage event. The HUD itself is clean and clearly communicates everything it needs to, even if it does look a little too plain for my taste. From how much meter you have to how much time you have left on your V-trigger, everything is communicated pretty well. One small nitpick though is the colored character portraits. I wish they just kept it the normal colors. The characters themselves look okay. Some do look better than others. Of course, everyone has made fun of Ken's banana hair or Birdie's weird floating chain.
I'll eat something after this.
But more specifically, the art style of the game is decent. While I like looking at it more than Street Fighter 4, I feel like something else could have been done instead of the same water paint artsy aesthetic from the last game. But I mean, it's fine. It just feels like this part of the game's identity was sort of phoned in. What isn't phoned in though is this game's roster, because honestly, outside of the gameplay, this really is a pretty diverse cast. I mentioned earlier that with Street Fighter 4, the roster felt really safe, especially with the vanilla version of the game. But for Street Fighter 5, they did bring back a lot of highly requested characters, even in the base roster with characters like Armika, Karen, and Nash, who was even hinted at more in the story beats for being alive, again, which is really cool to see since the last time Nash was playable, he was kinda... Of course, we got brand new fighters as well, with the standout characters being Rashid, Laura, or even Nikali, who looks really cool, but only really feels like a living, breathing V. So yeah, all these things considered, the base roster for Street Fighter 5 was good, but small. But with each season came a new wave of characters or fresh takes on returning ones, and honestly, this is where the roster became so much better. Each new season brought characters that either aren't completely new to the Street Fighter series, but are making their first playable debut, or adding fan favorites and requested characters. Between all the DLC packs, they really did add a good balance of new characters and returning fighters. But even with the returning characters, you could tell the devs really want to experiment and mess with how these characters play and put a spin on their moveset. For example, Guile has the same tools since Street Fighter 2, Sonic Boom and Flash Kick. That's still true for Street Fighter 5, but he also has V-triggers and V-skills, which can give those same moves new attributes, which I think is a nice way of giving Guile cool new stuff while also keeping him familiar to returning players.
Street Fighter 5 really has come a long way since its launch. From the lack of substantial single-player content, to 8 frames of lag, to a competitive scene that felt like the game got stale too quickly, it really felt like everything was going wrong for this game. But in recent time, Street Fighter 5 has been talked about a little bit more positively, even though it still does have its detractors, and honestly, I can kind of see why.
With the heavy focus on rushdown and doing flashy combos, a big part of what makes so many people like Street Fighter is kind of lost in Street Fighter V. Why focus on neutral when rushdown and constant mix-ups are so much more effective? Why work on footsies and exact spacing of normals when blocking a jab is a mix-up all of its own? Things like footsies, spacing, and neutral do all exist in Street Fighter V, but they all feel de-emphasized in favor of making newer players feel cool doing flashy combos.
All that being said, Street Fighter V is a fun fighting game that I like to play. Personally, I even know people who got their start of their love of fighting games with Street Fighter V. And that might be because of the simpler battle mechanics. But I feel like Street Fighter went from being the fighting game to just a good entry-level fighting game that got you ready for more interesting ones.
Yes, of course, everyone knows that Dragon Ball FighterZ is the best fighting game out right now, because I, an almighty god, am playable.
Aren't you one of the worst characters in that game?
Fool, don't you dare defy a god.
Wow, I finally did it. My first review, and I didn't have to be like Maximilian or anybody else to do it. with my insight and my knowledge, my wit, I can make awesome fighting game content. The sky's the limit. Like, what else could I do next? Oh shit.